So I just wanted to get this video going about something that I've been working on, and so I created a little scene here, um, and the first thing is I did some art stuff, turning on lights and stuff, but the main thing that I wanted to show was I created a launcher. So in Project Snowblind, we had this really cool little widget that we could use in the level editor, and it was a launcher. It's basically just a little arrow that'll launch whatever you want. And so you can see over here I have some variables that I've exposed. So fire on play. So basically when we're playing the game, it's going to fire. It's going to shoot the launcher velocity along the x-axis at 2100 velocities, and then I have delays between them. So to see it in game, ignore the placeholder sound effect. I found that it's really hard to make explosion sounds. So it'll blow up whatever it hits. It has damage, it has force push. So you can see when it blows up, it knocks those little things away. And you can imagine what that might sound like and look like with better. The other thing that I did is I actually animated one launcher. So it kind of rotates back and forth, so it can kind of it shoots over a field. And I just wanted to show how I did that. So the first thing was to get the launcher. So I modeled a little arrow in Maya, and then I gave it a translucent shader. It's just like a basic waiting for the there we go, some basic translucency on it. And then I created a blueprint out of it. And so if we open up the launcher's blueprint, I have a couple things here. So if it when it begins play, it checks to see if fire on play is checked, and if it is, then we just start spawning stuff. If it isn't, then it doesn't do anything. In the level blueprint, you can call this function on it start launcher, and then it will spawn a rocket class, which is another blueprint, which I'll show you in a second. But basically I use the spawn actor command and then attach a specific class to it, which is the blueprint that I created, and then I create a transform at using the launcher's location and rotation, so that's where it's spawning from. Then what I do is I set the projectile's velocity. So basically the return value is the thing that's spawned, and I set its velocity at launcher velocity, and that has a default of 500 along the x-axis, but it's also exposed, so you can set your own thing. And then I do a delay, and I just have like a random float, delay min and delay max, and those both have defaults too, but they're also exposed, so you can set them custom. So to look at the rocket blueprint, let's go find that. So the rocket blueprint is right here, and so the rocket blueprint is basically it's comprised of this little model here. I can model a rocket. I have no idea what happened with so I modeled it in Maya 2014, and apparently the FBX exporter is all jacked. So if you're using UE4, stick with Maya 2013 for right now, and or at least update your FBX thing. So it looks a little weird right now, but I can fix it later. And then looking at the rocket blueprint, so here what we are doing. So I have some components set to it. I have the projectile movement, and then I have its velocity and its speed set to 0, because we're going to be setting that later. It has a capsule collision on it, which I probably need to rotate, and then the static mesh. And then so if we go to the graph, you can see the projectile movement in the variables and the static mesh and the capsule. I'm not doing anything with that. And then we have my velocity. And so my velocity is set to 0. If we go really quickly back to the launcher actor, we can see that that we're setting the velocity of the rocket to the launcher velocity that's been set. So then that gets passed in through here. So set projectile velocity is a function in here, and then the velocity that gets passed in from the launcher sets the my velocity variable, and then we set the velocity in local space to that variable my velocity, and the target is the projectile movement variable, which is the component that has all the projectile movement information. So that's one thing that we do. The next thing that happens with this is it has a function on component hit. One thing that I learned about on component hit is that if you this doesn't work against BSP. So basically in my scene, I had to basically set the floor. It looks like it's BSP, but it's not. It's actually individual static mesh pieces. I just created a plane in Maya and exported it out and then copy pasted it everywhere. So it needs that. So what I do is when it hits something, I spawn an actor. That actor is called a squib, and the squib is basically everything that handles the explosion. And then I spawn that at the location that this actor, the rocket, is at when it collides with something. And then after it spawns the explosion, we destroy the rocket. So now let's take a look at the explosion. So let's first look at its components. So the first one is the particle effect, the smoke particle effect. So basically just created some, I was trying to mimic Wind Waker just for some placeholder particle effects. It also has a point light on it, and it has an audio, like an audio thingy, and then it also has a radial force actor. And so if we go into the graph, let's look at what this guy does now. So so the first thing that it does is when it starts, we play the audio, and then we attach the audio to an event, and on the audio finished event, this gets fired. There's a little delay here, and then it destroys itself because we don't want the explosions to, all these actors need to clean up after themselves. Then what we do after we play the sound is we toggle the visibility of the point light, and then we fire the impulse of the radial force actor, and then we do apply radial damage. Damage is a variable here that has default, but it's also exposed, so we can set it. I'm still need to make it so that the rocket can set the damage. And then I want it to, it spawns, it applies the radial damage at the actor's location, basically at the center of the explosion. And then the damage radius is also defined here, but it's also something that we can set specifically. The damage causer is self, so the explosion is the thing that the squib is the thing that causes the damage. And then what we do is we do a small delay for 1/10 of a second, and then we toggle the visibility again of that point light so that it's just like a flash. And that's it so far. So again, just to see that in action. I also have attenuation on the sound, so you can't, you know, the farther away you are from it, you can't, the less you can hear it. Not realistic, but it functions and it works.